Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, April 28th, 2020. And today we're going to be continuing our story, Koo. Chapter 6, Snow. The next morning, the air felt unusually thick and still. There was something ominous about it. Even Koo could feel it where she huddled deep in her nest, but it was too soon for snow, so she didn't worry. Storm, said New Tick Tick, zooming in and out of the doorway. The pigeons always knew the weather before Koo did, even young ones like New Tick Tick. Big snow, soon. Snow. The worst word. Heart-pounding Koo stumbled out onto the roof. The sky was heavy and gray. The clouds were so dense and low that the faraway skyline and its lights had disappeared. The air was frigid. Koo shivered, and not just from the cold. She was scared, really scared. Snow? Koo asked Hoop anxiously. Too early. Leaves on the trees now. Snow rarely came before all the leaves were gone from the trees. Koo could see from the roof, and quite a few brown, red, and yellow ones still hung on the branches. Snow, Hoop replied. Much snow. Scarier than hawks, scarier than metal jangling human strangers, scarier than anything was snow. Koo's earliest storms were icy whirlwinds, pigeons blanketing her 3 birds deep in the dovecot to keep her from freezing to death. As she grew, she learned to burrow into her nest, pile on insulating newspapers, and wait it out in chilled fear. Just the year before, she had survived a bad blizzard. 2 nights and 3 days trapped inside the dovecot, with only half a soggy sesame bagel and barely enough old clump of newspaper packed around her to save her from turning into an icicle. Even after that horrible storm stopped howling, it took weeks for the snow to melt off the roof and months for Koo's bones to really warm up. And that was back when she had regular food. And Burr, who always looked out for her. Well, who would look out for her now? She stared across the roof toward the alley. Tilly. Ever since she'd become dizzy trying to climb onto the fire escape, she'd been weak and scared to try to return to the alley. But now there was a storm coming. Could Tilly give her some food and more things like the hat and scarf to keep warm? Maybe Tilly even know how to stop the snow before it arrived. Could humans do that? Tilly, Koo hobbled across the roof and called down into the alley. Help me, you, Tilly. No one replied. The alley was deserted. Koo shivered and her stomach rumbled. If Tilly came, would she even have the strength to climb down the fire escape? A few snowflakes swirled from the sky. Koo gave one last look at the alley and stumbled back into the dovecot. Koo awoke blinking and shivering. Something cold and sharp was prickling her cheeks. Her hair was damp and heavy, so was the rest of her body. Snow! Lots of it, just like the pigeons had said. Koo tottered to her feet. Clumps of snow tumbled from her body. She was numb with cold everywhere except for her head and neck, which were covered by Tilly's hat and scarf. While she'd slept, the wind had lashed great drifts across the roof and into the doorway. The dovecot shook. Pigeons muttered around her. No matter what happened, the flock would survive. Snow was one of those things that pigeons, healthy ones, handled better than humans. The wind gusted another spray of ice pellets onto Koo's cheeks. Suddenly, she wondered about Burr. If he was still alive, was he warm and dry? Was Tilly keeping him safe? Storm, not good, Koo whispered. Bad, bad, bad. At the sound of her voice, pigeons hopped down from their patches and huddled around her. Poor you, said Hoop. No feathers. She extended her brownish dappled wing over Koo's shivering shoulder. Scared me, Koo murmured. The snow was colder and icier than it had ever been before. How was that possible? She closed her eyes. Times were different, too. It was slower. She thought of the sandwich Tilly had given her. She thought of Tilly's face and her soft hands and her voice. Koo pulled the red hat so far down over her face it almost reached her mouth. The wind screamed past the dovecot shrill as a cat, and Koo jumped. She started to cry, then made herself stop. Tears froze and hurt her skin. Stay warm, you. New Tick Tick landed on Koo's head and nuzzled her ears. Okay, you. Strong, you. Kind words helped. Koo took a shuddering breath. Storms always ended. Snow always melted. It was just a matter of getting through it. Hours passed. Koo got very sleepy. She fought to stay awake. She knew sleep was bad. Weak, sick pigeons who fell asleep in storms never woke up. She blinked and pinched herself. Suddenly there was a great bang, as if a part of the roof had collapsed. The pigeons lifted up in the air, tumbling together in the dovecot, and settled back on their perches. Coo's hands, despite their numbness, began to tremble. She had never in all her years heard such a noise on the roof. "Coo!" a faint human voice shouted. "Where are you? Goodness, what is a dovecot doing on this old roof? Coo, are you in that thing?" Coo pushed through the snow and wind until her head poked through the doorway. Night had fallen. The whole world streaked with swirling snow. She squinted and blinked as a plump black shape, a big garbage bag with legs, appeared in the whirlwind. A bright beam of light zigzagged around it. It flashed directly into Coo's eyes, blinding her, and then vanished. "Coo," the garbage bag screamed. "Tully, I knew I'd seen you on this roof. Those police officers wouldn't come check," Tully said as she stumbled to the dovecot. "You live here, all alone? My God." Tully pulled Coo into a warm hug and stuck her head through the door. "Hello, is anyone in there?" The flock hooted softly. "Oh, you poor baby, you would have died. Come with me, hurry." They staggered over the rooftop snowdrifts toward the tower with the forever shut door. Now the tower had a big black hole in one side, and the door was a flap of metal swinging in the snowy wind. "Going you, tiny new Tick-Tick," just a ball of gray struggling to stay aloft in the howling wind, had followed Coo out into the storm. "Where, Coo?" "Back to the dovecot, you," Coo cried. "Too windy." New Tick-Tick bobbed for a moment, then turned and zoomed into the wall of snow. She would make it to the dovecot just fine, Coo knew. Healthy young pigeons always did. But humans? What happened when they left the dovecot? Coo took a deep breath. She was alone with Tully now. Whatever happened next was beyond anything she'd imagined. Tully pushed Coo through the doorway and slammed the slab of metal behind them. They plunged into a silent pitch blackness. Never had Coo been in such darkness. Just as suddenly there was light. A shocking yellow glow emanated from a black bar Tully gripped in her left mitten. The wild zigzagging light had been coming from Tully's hand. "Sunlight on a stick." "Holy moly," said Tully. "You're wearing nothing but plastic bags and my old hat and scarf. Take my coat, quickly." Tully pulled off the black thing that she wore and wrapped it around Coo. It was heavy and so long it dragged on the floor, but it was so warm and soft. Coo's deep shivering slowed. "Maybe I should call an ambulance. Can you walk? Try." Coo followed as Tully began clunking her way down a dark and musty iron staircase. Coo's snowy plastic bag shoes slipped and slid, and Tully gripped her hand. Inside the building, under the roof, despite the hunger and cold, Coo craned her neck to look around. It was spooky. Tully's flashlight illuminated a dusty, paint-peeling, abandoned world, a place full of shadows. Coo did not like the inside of the building, she decided. Tully led her all the way down the stairs and through the now open doorway into the snowy corridor between the factory and the fence. Coo was relieved to be outside again, even in the howling wind and snow. Tully helped Coo sit on the snowy step while she stomped around looking for the fence strip. When she found it, she pushed Coo through and then wiggled out after her. "It's just as well you're wearing my coat. I barely fit," Tully huffed, pulling her legs through and standing up again. "Now I think I can carry you, at least until we reach the plowed street." Coo was alarmed but too weak to protest when Tully swooped her off her feet and began trudging up the alley. For the first time, Coo went beyond the bend. The alley led to a loosely chained gate made from the same material as the fence. Still holding Coo, Tully wiggled through the gap, then put Coo down. A rumble like the loudest train Coo had ever heard rolled past them, and snow was flung in all directions. "Snowplow," Tully shouted. "Don't be scared. Can you walk now?" Coo clung to Tully's sweater sleeve as they stumbled over the drifts and onto the plowed street. Maybe Tully was taking her to the same place she took sick birds, like Hoop said she would. Maybe she healed humans too. "I told the police I'd bring you straight to the precinct if I found you, but I just can't do it. Not tonight." Tully shook her head. "I don't know what they'll do with you or where they'll send you, even though I sure would be satisfying to see the look on their faces when they have to admit I wasn't seeing things." Coo focused entirely on walking, not bothering to try to decipher what Tully was saying. The street was clear of snow, but very slippery with slush and ice. Coo looked up. The buildings had dropped away, and they were passing a wide, flat field of nothing but snow. Even Food Bazaar closed for this blizzard, Tilly said when she saw Koo looking at it. I've never seen a parking lot so empty. Tuli coaxed her along, babbling brightly. We're almost there now, Koo. We just crossed the big road and soon we'll be on my block. Just another few steps. Then we'll go inside and get you warmed up. Tuli's voice was soothing. I'll call the police in the morning when I figured out exactly what to say. Back when Ben had his accident, well, we won't get into that. It's just hard for me to trust them, especially during a blizzard like this. They reached a quiet street and scrunched together buildings. Cars piled up with snow sat still and dark along the edges of the road like frosted buns. The snow was everywhere, swirling in the yellow lights that sat on tall poles. Koo looked around. She was almost delirious with hunger and cold, but still curious. Food, Koo thought. Maybe there would be food. It was the only way to keep herself upright. This is my building, Tully said, lifting Koo up a snow-covered slope of steps and through a heavy brown door. The howling of the wind quieted. They walked along a short hallway to a pale blue door with a faded flower print mat in front of it. Welcome to my apartment, Koo. Koo stepped inside. Her thoughts of food vanished. She gasped. Chapter 7, Tully's home. Brr. Koo rushed to the cube of thin twigs that sat on the table in the corner. Healed you? She pressed her face against the cage and inhaled Burr's familiar scent. Trapped you. Not trapped me, said Burr. Cage opens. Can't fly, me. He lifted his limp left wing, and with horror, Koo saw it hung askew from the side of his body. A tiny pink and green length of knitting, like a miniature scarf, wound around it up to Burr's neck and kept the wing from brushing the ground. Koo had never seen such a thing. Pigeons who couldn't fly died fast. No, Koo whispered. Not still broken, you. No. Yes, broken. Always broken now. Don't worry, you. Safe here, me. Helps me, Tully's string, he said, and pecked the little scarf. But can't fly, you. Koo was on the verge of tears. Hawks, cats. No hawks here, no cats. Are you two communicating? Tully's eyes were large as donuts. You were living along with those pigeons in that old pigeon coop. Koo stared at her, cautious. She had never seen a face that looked so shocked. What if the strangers covered in metal were on their way? She sized up Burr's cage and Tully's doorway. But then her stomach rumbled. Her knees felt flimsier than newspaper, and it was snowing. There was no place to run. She knew she couldn't make it to the alley, much less climb the fire escape. At least she and Burr were together, and he was alive. I've heard stories about kids raised by animals, Tully continued, blinking rapidly. Mostly bears, or maybe tigers. I remember in school learning about the legend of the twin boys raised by wolves in ancient Italy. One of them ended up founding the city of Rome, but they were myths, and none were about pigeons. Pigeons? It's just not possible. Tully looked alarmed. She rubbed her temples. But who left you with them? Where are your parents? Oh, the neglect. So loud, her, Koo whispered to Burr. Loud humans are, Burr replied. Loud too, you. Koo rattled the bars of Burr's cage. Free, she shouted at Tully in pigeon. Free him, you. Here I am, muttering to myself about all this when you want to see your friend. I'm sorry, Koo. Here you go. Tully lumbered to her feet. She fiddled with some wires on Burr's cage, and a door opened among the bars. Go on, she said to Koo. He's out of danger now. I knit him a little sling, which seems to help his wings stay comfortable. Koo shimmied out of Tully's big coat and reached into the wire box. At once, she and Burr were together again. He nestled against her chilly arms, his feathers soft and warm against her cold skin. Happy, said Koo, trembling. I'm so happy. Me too, said Burr. You really are speaking to him. Oh, what on earth am I going to do with you? I can't hand you over to strangers now. What will your life be like if it's discovered how you were surviving? Tully put her head in her hands. I wish my dear Ben was here to help. Tully stood up and began opening and shutting doors and disappearing into other rooms. Koo looked up from the sheer joy of cuddling Burr to study her. What was she doing? At the very least, I can help you clean up and get into some soft, normal clothes, Tully said when she returned holding a pile of cloth. Not those disgusting plastic bags. Come on, let's go to the bathroom. When Tully reached for her, motioning for her to hand Burr over, Koo recoiled. No, you, Koo shouted in pigeon. She took Burr against her chest and dashed behind a chair. Hide, why? Safe here, you, said Burr. Kind she is. Ku was too exhausted and confused to argue with him. I see I'm going to have to win your trust. Tilly sighed. You must be hungry. A few minutes later, Tilly crouched down in front of the chair holding a small apple. Apple? Do you know apples? Tilly mimed, taking a bite. A whole apple, round as a doorknob and green as a new leaf. Ku looked at it in wonder. She had only ever seen them half bitten, smashed, or chewed down to the core. You eat it, Tilly said, handing it to her. We'll do a bath and new clothes tomorrow. I'll go back to the kitchen to figure out more food for you now. That night, after eating the perfect green apple, 6 strawberries, and a pile of flaky, sticky squares Tilly called peanut butter crackers, and drinking water that tasted cleaner than fresh rain, Ku felt safe enough to crawl out from behind the chair. Tilly led her to a small dark room and helped her curl up on a narrow plank that sat against one wall. Burr napped beside her with his head tucked under his crooked wing. Tilly slumbered in the main room on the wide, soft pink and white chair she said was called a love seat. The blizzard and the wild trek through the snow had tired her to the bone, but Ku lay wide awake for a long time. Her stomach was full for the first time in ages, but the spongy plank under her was peculiar. She worried she would sink into it right to the floor. The warm things Tilly called blankets smelled good, but some shredded newspaper and plastic bags would have made her more comfortable. By themselves, the blankets were so flat and clean it made her nervous. Ku could see snow swirling in wind-battered trees through a window covered in a solid puddle of clear ice, the kind of window Ruhu complained about. It was very cold to the touch, yet it didn't crack no matter how hard she tapped it. Odd here, Ku murmured. She lifted Burr's wings, careful not to undo his sling, to peer into his sleepy face. Safe you, cooed Burr. Happy me, sleep now you. Ku smiled at him. Burr was very different from her, but he was still the most important person in the world. She nestled down into the blankets next to him, forgetting how distant she was now from the flock. The next morning, Ku blinked awake. It was winter, but she wasn't cold. She was inside, but it was bright, not dim. It wasn't a dovecot. It was a room in the place where Tilly lived, the place where sick pigeons went to heal. She shut her eyes, and the previous day spun around her like the heavy snow. Hear me, Burr cooed. He was right beside her, cocking his head back and forth. Sleep long, you, he said. Wait, me. Up now, me, swiftly. Ku scooped him into her arms for a cuddle. Out of all the shocking events since the blizzard began, finding Burr was the most stunning. She remembered how old Tick-Tick and some of the others had thought she shouldn't even try to bring him to Tilly. What if she had listened to them? She shuddered deep inside. Fine, Tilly, you, said Burr. Food here, every morning. Ku stood up and plopped Burr on her shoulder. Then she crept to the open doorway. Food indeed. It smelled a bit like donuts, rich and sweet. Tilly hovered over a squat green thing in the corner of the big room. Come eat, said Tilly. The stuff's doing a good job warming up the place today. Ku sat down on a chair at the round, flat circle that Tilly gestured to. The table, Tilly called it. It was covered in a flowery cloth. She was surprised that things besides humans wore clothing. The night before, she'd been too overwhelmed to really look at Tilly's home. Now she peered around curiously. There was a small table where Ku sat. There were 2 more big clear windows filled with snow. In front of one on a ledge was a round little brown pot with a green plant growing in it. Near the windows were a big blue chair all piled up with things like Ku's hat and scarf and a smaller green chair that was empty. Ku was startled to find that chairs came in colors and materials other than the faded red plastic of the one she'd grown up with on the roof. Above Burr's table and cage was a set of shelves, just like the dovecot shelves, stacked with a dozen flat, bright slabs. Tiny black marks covered them, just like on newsprint. Interesting. Ku hopped up from the chair by the food and scrambled over to the table beneath the shelves. She hopped up on that, reaching for the shelf, and... No, Tilly barked, sharpened as a seagull. Hands grabbed Ku under her armpits and dragged her back down. Dangerous. Tilly's mouth was a deep frown. Climbing, she said slowly. Fall. Hurt. Ouch. Understand? Ku stared back. Tilly's words were beginning to make some kind of sense. Somehow she knew Tilly meant she wasn't supposed to stand on the table. But it wasn't just her words. It was also the way her eyebrows shifted and her mouth moved, and even how her shoulders tensed and relaxed. Pigeons communicated some things in the way they puffed their feathers or bent their heads, but it was nowhere near as complex as what humans did with their faces and bodies. Sit down at the table again, Tilly said, pointing, before the pancakes get cold. Pancakes. Tilly nudged a spiky metal rod into Koo's direction, but Koo brushed it aside to quickly pick up the whole buttery, sticky stack of flat bread in both hands and take a giant bite. Sweetness and a shock. The pancakes were hot, like the rooftop on a summer day. I see you need to learn how to use forks and spoons. The corner of Tilly's mouth twitched. She turned and flipped out another pancake on the stove. Most people don't eat pancakes with their hands. Food good, Koo said in pigeon, her mouth so full of warm pancake it was hard to speak. Burr hopped down from her shoulder to peck up the soft crumbs falling all around her plate. Then he hobbled over to the edge of the table so Tilly, smiling, could pop more little pancake scraps into his beak. I wonder how long I can wait to call the police about you, Koo, without them considering it kidnapping, Tilly said. She had finished cooking and sat down at the table to eat her own pancakes. Her face had become dense with lines and a deep frown. Considering how long they took to do anything after Ben's accident, I don't imagine they'd look too carefully into it. Koo inhaled the last bit of pancake on her plate. But first, bath time. You shouldn't have to spend another moment in your own filth, or those plastic bags. Still not understanding nearly everything Tilly said, Koo suspected nothing when Tilly ushered her and Burr into a tiny white room near the front door. Here's the bathroom. You're going to take a shower. Water, soap, clean. Koo wasn't listening. She was staring in utter shock at a strange slab stuck like a strange window in the wall. It was the clearest puddle she'd ever seen, more vivid than the cleanest, freshest ice. In it, she saw Tilly, who was holding Burr, and then a face she knew, almost from the puddles on the roof. But it wasn't greenish-brown and vague with leaves and sticks and grit. She reached her hand up and touched her nose. The figure in the wall touched its nose. Me, Koo pressed her hands against her reflection. Me, Koo. On her head, brown hair, browner than autumn leaves, it was matted thick like the tumbleweed tangles in the roof corners, and trailed down her back. Her skin was tan and pink and streaked with brown and gray patches. Her eyes were what startled her the most. They were just like Tilly's, spring sky blue. Me, she said out loud again. Yes, a mirror, said Tilly. We might as well get the washing up part over with. Come, stand in the tub. She helped Koo out of her dirty plastic bags and then lifted her into a little room within the room she called the bathtub. Then she turned some slivery knobs on the walls. What happened next was the warmest, most terrible rainstorm Koo had ever been through. Hot water poured through the ceiling while Koo covered her eyes, too frightened to scream. She waited for the booming thunder and flashing lightning that nearly always accompanied such downpours, but astonishingly, they didn't come. Worse than the fear of thunder and lightning, though, was the bitter-tasting white goop Tilly rubbed all over her head and skin. It smelled almost, but not quite, like fresh flowers. Soap, Tilly called it. Koo howled and pushed it away. Hush, said Tilly. At the rate you're going, I won't need to call the cops. The neighbors will do it for me. Koo kept her eyes shut tight and wished for the rain to end. No soap was enough to save this hair, Tilly sighed. She turned the shiny knob on the wall again and the rain stopped. Then she wrapped Koo in a big soft cloth and helped her over to the mirror. Come over here and hold very still. Tilly got out a sharp piece of metal and started snipping at Koo's head. Koo watched the horror as clumps of her matted hair fell to the floor. At the same time, she felt suddenly lighter. And we're done. See? Look in the mirror. Koo looked up. The face that stared back at her had changed again. Now it was scrubbed red. Clean. No more dirt marks. Her eyes looked less blue, but she looked past them up to her head. She touched it. Gone was the rough, weedy tangle she'd always known. In its place was a short, almost feathery wave of brownish-yellow hair, still slightly damp to the touch. Tilly helped Koo get into something new and clean that Tilly had called clothes. Soft, stretchy leaf green tubes that sagged over her legs, and a large white flap of softness that went over her head and arms. Leggings and a sweatshirt. They're awfully large on you because they're mine, said Tilly. We'll get you proper clothes at Goodwill soon. Koo looked in the mirror again. A dizzy feeling came over her, like she got from spinning in circles, or from the too hot sun with no water on a late summer day. Tilly, cleaning up the towels and hair and plastic sacks on the floor, wasn't paying her any attention. Burr had hopped out in the kitchen to eat the last of the breakfast scraps. Everything different now, whispered Coo, staring at herself. Everything. Whirling snow, snow in her mouth, snow burning her skin, naked, no hat, no scarf, no plastic bags, even. Snow in the darkness, snow everywhere. Coo ran and ran across the roof, but the dovecot never got any closer. No pigeons flew to meet her. Help me, she screamed, help. Warm arms and a soft voice pulled her out of the nightmare. Hush, you're safe here, shh, everything is okay. A light switched on, yellow warm sun. Tilly sat beside her on the squishy plank. She stroked Coo's hair. Burr hobbled across Coo's shoulder and nestled into the crook of Tilly's arm. Slowly, Coo woke up. Stay here, me, Coo said urgently, sleepily. She couldn't go back into the cold. Please. Only pigeons know what you're saying, Coo, murmured Tilly. But don't worry, I've made up my mind. I'm going to take care of you. Nothing and no one will stop me. You're safe here now. And that ends our chapters 6 and 7 of our story, Coo. Tomorrow will be Wednesday, which will be the first day of our pet therapy videos. So I hope you have a great afternoon, and we will continue our story on Thursday. Bye.